It's late. Maybe it's literally 2 a.m. for you right now, or maybe it just kind of feels like 2 a.m. in your head. The world is quiet, all those loud distractions from the day, they're gone, and you're just left sitting there with that heavy, quiet thing in your chest. Now, throughout your life, you've probably been told by well-meaning friends, by society, or maybe even by that little voice in your own head that it's just time to move on. But in this explainer today, I actually want to offer you something completely different. I want you to just take a deep breath, settle in, and let's rethink absolutely everything we've been taught about healing and loss. Let's look at the truth. So let's start here. Have you ever felt that if you were to truly smile again, like if you were to actually experience genuine joy, it would somehow be an insult to the person or the relationship or the dream that you lost? There is this secret, almost paralyzing guilt that so many of us carry around. It's this incredibly quiet fear that our suffering is literally the only tether left connecting us to what we loved. And that exact guilt brings us to our first real shift in perspective today. Section 1, the lie of moving on. We need to gently but firmly dismantle this deeply ingrained cliche because, honestly, it is doing us way more harm than good. See, we treat moving on like it's a literal destination. Like there's some town out there called Moved On with a nice little welcome sign, and if we just drive fast enough and far enough, we'll eventually get there and leave the past totally in the rearview mirror. But the human heart, it simply does not work that way. The real truth is that healing isn't about leaving your past behind. It is about learning to carry it without letting it carry you. There's this really beautiful, incredibly comforting psychological concept called continuing bonds. And what it reveals is that the goal of grief isn't some clinical, total detachment. Healthy grieving actually involves maintaining an internal relationship with what was lost. You absolutely do not have to sever the tie. You just have to change the nature of the relationship. The loss, it stays inside you, but it changes shape. But what actually happens when we try to force that process? We end up right here in Section 2, the prison of being fine. This is that silent trap we fall into when we decide to prioritize the comfort of everyone else around us over the actual reality of our own pain. We put on this armor of, I'm fine. But listen, suppression isn't strength. If you're skipping straight to a forced acceptance just to make your friends or your family comfortable, it means you haven't actually healed. You've just gone into hiding. You've basically driven your grief underground. Conscious pain moves while avoided pain doesn't. When you intentionally look away from the pain just because it's too raw, too much to touch, it doesn't just magically disappear. It stays exactly where you left it, just waiting. And this leads to what psychologists call calcified grief. Think of avoidance almost like preserving your pain in amber. It freezes it perfectly in place. It becomes totally static. And then, years down the line, that frozen pain is inevitably going to thaw and surface, often showing up as inexplicable rage or just a really deep, lingering numbness. Which brings us right back to that guilt we talked about a minute ago. Are you living in a private religion? It's a very seductive lie we tell ourselves, right? This idea that the depth of our ongoing suffering is somehow the only accurate measure of how much that person or that dream really mattered to us. We turn our pain into the only acceptable prayer. We literally turn our suffering into a prison because we think it's a tribute, but it's not. And we see this kind of paralysis happen, not just with death, but in these profound silent losses too, like the loss of a best friend. We have ceremonies for death, right? We have legal terms for divorce. But when a platonic anchor in your life just collapses, when the person who literally mapped out your future and knew you best is suddenly gone, it feels exactly like standing in a house right after a fire. It is this unnamed, highly specific grief that leaves you entirely paralyzed about who you even are now. And standing in the ruins of that house, we so often encounter an emotion that really scares us. Section 3. Anger is a guard dog. Let's reframe this because we're usually taught that anger is some kind of moral failure. But in the direct wake of loss or abandonment or powerlessness, anger is entirely natural. It is literally the guard dog of your heart. It's the fierce, undeniable evidence that what you lost actually mattered to you. The danger isn't in feeling the anger. The danger is when you let that anger calcify into a permanent posture, when you let the wave become the water you just live in every day. You have to let it move through you. And part of letting that wave move is recognizing exactly how we try to fight it. We bargain. We treat our emotions like a logic puzzle we can somehow outthink, trying so desperately to recover control and fix the present by arguing with the past. But you can't outthink pain.
bargaining just traps you in a completely fictional version of events that never even happened. True, deep honesty means treating your grief as a weather system. You can't argue with a storm. You just have to let it pass over you. And when that storm finally does break, you look around and realize something truly profound. Section 4. Becoming someone completely new. Think about the literal architecture of your identity. There was the self that existed before the loss, and then the collapse. We spend so much of our time in the rubble of that collapse, just waiting to go back to who we were. We wait to feel like our old selves again. But that person before the loss, they no longer exist. You literally cannot go back. You can only move forward into the next phase, which is the expansion. Loss is not simply a subtraction from your life. It is an absolute reorganization of it. It requires a completely new blueprint for who you are. Waiting to go back to normal is essentially a form of suspension. It completely stops yourself from expanding into the person you are actually required to become now. And as you begin to slowly build that new blueprint, you have to face what might be the absolute hardest task of all. Section 5, the courage to be joyful. I want to say this to you right now as a friend who is granting you a permission you might not even know you needed. Living fully is not a betrayal of the past. It is the only real tribute available. You have got to free yourself from this hostage situation of perpetual suffering. You've been treating joy like it's a crime. But wasting the precious life you still have left, that honors absolutely no one. So how do we actually do this? How do we integrate these incredibly heavy truths into our daily lives? Let's move to Section 6, moving forward with it. We need to choose rituals over avoidance. First, try treating your emotions as guests. Welcome the sadness in, sit with it for a bit, and then let it leave. Next, revisit your memories deliberately. Create structured, highly intentional encounters with your loss. Because when you do this consciously, your grief remains dynamic. It finally starts to move rather than just staying frozen in the dark forever. And this brings us to the foundational realization of our entire time together today. The absolute truth that really changes everything. You don't move on, you move forward with it. Just let that settle in for a second. The burden itself doesn't just magically disappear. Your shoulders just get stronger. As we close out this explainer today, I want to leave you with one final, very quiet thought. What is one small return to living you can grant yourself today? It doesn't have to be massive. Honestly, just a small piece of evidence that life is still possible. A cup of coffee in the sun. Finally calling that friend. Taking just one step forward, with the loss safely tucked inside you. Just think about it. I'll leave you with that.